Today, we're talking about one of the most universal pressures in ministry when Sunday goes sideways. You know exactly what I mean, right? If you're a pastor or if you work in ministry, I know you do. You have worked hard all week. You have prayed and poured over every detail. You've prepped the message. You've prepped the worship. You've prepped the guest services hospitality team, the ushers. You've prepared as much as you can. And then Sunday happens. The slides froze for no reason. You have no idea. It worked fine in rehearsal, The volunteer that you really needed this morning didn't show up and didn't even tell you. The worship team, who is normally right on it, was just off today. Or maybe it was the sermon. You really worked hard on it and you knew that God could use it, but it just, for some reason, it just didn't land. And before, right, that final song ended, you feel like you're about to crawl out of your skin. I mean, every pastor, right, feels the pressure to perform perfectly. And I hate to say it, but for God. God's never asked us to, but we sure feel that pressure, don't we? Like, we know ministry isn't performance-based, but like there's something that kind of, breaks or when something flops, it's hard to not take it personally, especially when you've been personally so invested in it. After all, right, especially if you're the lead pastor, you are in charge. We internally, I guess we internalize, right, every glitch as a failure. And we think, gosh, if I could have just planned better, maybe this would not have happened. But here's the reality. Sunday will always test your preparation and your peace. Let me say that again, okay? Every Sunday, it's going to test your preparation and your peace. And because there's real pressure of leadership, and it's not about logistics. It's really mostly about how you respond when things don't go as planned. How do you respond when things kind of start falling apart? Because Sundays are going to be problematic at times. Things are just going to happen. And when Sunday collapses, I always try to remind myself of two truths that anchor every great leader that I've ever seen in the church. Two truths when things fall apart, and they will. Here's the first one. God is still in control. Now, we preach this all the time, so we should know this, but it's easy to forget in the heat of the battle on Sunday morning. So remember, God is in control. Your job is faithfulness, not the fruitfulness. That's God's job. It's your job, my job, to prepare, to plan, and to preach. But only God can produce the results, right? If everything had gone perfectly, you actually might have been tempted to think that you did it. Sometimes I think it's good that things don't go perfectly. And when it doesn't, it's really an opportunity to remember who is in charge, who is in control, who is responsible for the results. And it's not you. So God is in control. When things go awry, it's okay because it's not you who is responsible for the results anyway. Now, number two, and this is just as important, the enemy doesn't fight what isn't a real threat either. Sometimes, and we don't think of it this way much, and I don't want to be kind of hyper spiritual weird, okay? I don't mean it that way, but there is a real enemy. And when we are making progress in the kingdom, the target grows, right? Like sometimes, think of it this way, sometimes chaos is actually confirmation that something good is happening. Like if it feels like things are going wrong or everything's going wrong, it might be because the enemy knows something's about to go really right. That perspective shift really can change a lot, right? Like instead of frustration, you can respond with faith. Instead of panic, you can model peace. This just happened to me a few weeks back. I have lots of churches that I work with, and I often preach on Sunday mornings for my clients and that I'm working with. And I was just at Rivertown Community Church several weeks ago. We were doing a 2-week series that I did both weeks called Revival. And in the second week, we talked about Pentecost, and we talked about Peter's sermon. Again, if you're a pastor, you're in ministry, you know the sermon. 3,000 people put their faith in Jesus that day. It was incredible, right? God was up to some incredible things. And so when Peter preaches that message, at the end of his message, the crowd, there were some mockers, you remember that, but a lot of people in the crowd just were cut to the heart is the way that Luke wrote it. They were cut to the heart. And they asked, what should we do? And so Peter responded, repent and be baptized. And so we gave people an opportunity to repent. And in the message, I told them that in a few minutes, we're going to sing a song and we're going to give you a chance to repent. And so I thought the message went really well. Again, we just told the entire story and let Peter mostly do the preaching. And so, as you know, the gospel really never returns void. And so we gave people an opportunity to repent. And wouldn't you know, we were 30 seconds, maybe a minute into a closing song. And then I was going to come back after the closing song and ask people to stand up so that we could celebrate with them if they repented today. So it was a big public thing we were doing. And so 30 seconds into the song, maybe a minute, the entire sound system goes out. The PA completely shuts down. The band kind of keeps going, and luckily somebody had an acoustic guitar, and so you could hear them kind of singing. I looked over at the lead pastor, his name is Paul, and Paul Smith, and I said, hey, Paul, I said, let's just keep going. I said, I'll go up there, I'll do the end like we were going to do. We won't have a microphone, and that's okay. And so the band finished the song acoustically, a cappella, no PA. I walked up afterwards, and you know what I said? I said, I think sometimes when things like this happen, it means that God's up to something. And everybody kind of smiled and cheered, and we moved forward with next steps. And about 50 people, as I remember, about 50 people stood up to publicly display that they had made a decision to repent. Again, I think when we're doing something of significance, the enemy takes note a little bit more, but that doesn't mean that God's not still in control. I mean, when the plan fails, we really do, I guess, have a choice. We can react emotionally, or we can respond spiritually. So how do you do that? Like, how can you respond intentionally when these moments happen on Sunday? Maybe it's a minor moment, or maybe the entire sound system goes down. Well, a couple of things. One, take a breath before you try to take control. A lot of us as leaders we're good at taking control. It's why we're in leadership. But your first job isn't really to fix the problem. It's to steady the people. And so a calm pastor really can steady the team to really display peace under pressure. And that kind of thing is contagious. Again, when I think back about what happened at Rivertown Community Church, when the sound system went down, the band immediately looked over to their right, and we were standing on the front row singing along, me, the lead pastor, and we both just smiled at them and kind of motioned, just keep going. Well, we were a little bit, not panicking, but on the inside, it was easy to have a lot of emotion. In fact, their production director kind of ran up front, grabbed the lead pastor real quick and said, the PA went down, whatever. And, we both just kind of said, it's okay. We'll just keep going. Now, we fixed the problem in between services, and it actually was just random. There was nothing that could have been done to better prepare for that. But I think we were really calm in the midst of that. And I think the team took note. In fact, the whole church, I felt like, took note. So the first thing you do, you just take a breath before you try to take control. Okay, number two, what else can you do? Well, you really can worry more about protecting people than perfection. I know. I mean, we all want things to be perfect. And I think we accurately believe that the closer to perfect we get, right, the more space we create for God to do what only He can do. We're trying to create a distraction-free environment on Sunday mornings. But, when we kind of vent or snap or, make someone else the scapegoat. I've been in churches before where something goes wrong and, that guy on the stage says, well, if Bill would have, it's just that emotional reaction, really probably in pride because they're feeling embarrassed, and maybe that's insecurity that's coming out. But when something goes wrong, don't vent and don't snap and definitely don't call anyone out. Frustration doesn't fix problems. It actually creates problems because it fractures trust. Instead, it's a great opportunity to lead with grace in public and then solve with some clarity in private. There'll be an opportunity to evaluate, an opportunity to make things better, but in that moment, that is not the moment. A couple more. Number three, you can really reframe that failure in real time as success. Say it out loud even if you have to. Even when things don't go as planned, God is still at work. In fact, that one statement, Even when things don't go as planned, God is still at work. That one statement can reset the entire room. Again, I go back to that moment at Rivertown Community Church. That's exactly what I did. I walked on stage and said, God must be up to something powerful today, because someone doesn't want the sound system to work. And everybody relaxed and everybody smiled, but I think began to process a little differently. Now, I don't know, did more people repent because the sound system went down and the way we handled it? I don't know. But I do know we could have ruined that opportunity in that moment if we would have reacted emotionally instead of responded spiritually, and if we wouldn't have reframed that moment. There was a moment when I was the lead pastor at Woodstock City that a similar thing, the entire power went down as I was getting ready to do everything I could to convince people who were curious about faith or new to faith or exploring or seeking, some truth, to attend this thing that we do called Starting Point. It's like Alpha, if you've heard of that. Basically, it's a 4 to 8 week, depending on how you wanted to do it, a small group experience for people who are new to faith or exploring faith. We called them seekers, starters, returners. And so I was about to make that announcement. The entire power went out, and we had lots of people at our church at that season who were in that category, who were exploring faith, were not Christians. And this was such a great way to help them take steps along that journey of faith. And so the power goes down. I walked on stage, and you know what I did? I just told everybody, I was like, hey, listen, the power went out. It's going to be fine. We're working on it, but we're going to keep going. And so I sat on the front of the stage. Now, you can imagine this. It's a big auditorium at Woodstock City Church. We had 2,100 seats. And so there were probably about 2,000 adults in the room in the moment. And I just sat on the front of the stage and I just talked about the power of asking questions of faith and not being afraid to ask, and that God isn't afraid of our questions. He welcomes them, because if the truth is true, then the truth has nothing to be afraid of. So if there's a question that you're afraid to ask, you shouldn't be afraid. That's why we have this thing called Starting Point, because we want to talk through these questions. We want to admit that this isn't just easy to believe in at first, that there are things that are questionable, and that's okay to question them. And I got to tell you, we had the largest Starting Point attendance we have ever had. And I just heard a story a few weeks ago of a person who was not a Christian. And this happened a decade ago, okay, as I'm recording today. It was a decade ago probably when this happened, or maybe 8 years ago. There was a person in the room that day who was not a Christian, who decided to go to a Starting Point group because of that moment. And he said, because of the way we handled it. It just felt so genuine that we cared about him and people like him. And he went to Starting Point and 4 weeks later placed his faith in Jesus. Now, again, could God have done that without the power failure? Of course he could, but how we handled it in some ways creates an even better opportunity for God to do what only he can do. So when things go wrong, just reframe it as not failure. Reframe it in real time so that God can do what only he can do. Two more really quick, okay? Debrief, but don't dwell on it. I mean, we should debrief after the service. You should have between service evals probably, and maybe not after the services on Sunday, but maybe Monday morning, you come in and there's a debrief, an evaluation of how things went, and you should do that. And you should talk about what we're learning, but not who's to blame for it, right? We want to capture takeaways, and we want to update and fix systems, and we want to move on and just execute better next time. I mean, sometimes the problems are preventable. Sometimes they're just not. Sometimes we learn something when a problem happens that allows us to prevent it from happening again. So again, growth is the goal here. We're not trying to guilt anybody. So debrief what happened, but we do that more in our small teams in private than we do publicly. And then the last thing, I think we should just pray for what the enemy tried to prevent. Like, if the morning felt unusually hard, maybe we should just pause and pray for the breakthrough that might be on the other side of that hardship. Again, when things go wrong, I don't want to blame Satan every time, but I think there are times where the enemy is working against what we're working for. We know that the enemy is working against what God's working for. So maybe we should just pause and we should pray and ask for God to intervene, not just our production team. Listen, if you're a pastor, just please hear this, okay? When plans fail, God hasn't. Like when the service flops, your leadership hasn't flopped. When the pressure rises, listen, peace is still possible, okay? The most powerful pastors that I know aren't the ones who lead every Sunday flawlessly. The most powerful pastors I know, they're the ones who stay faithful even when things begin to feel like they fall apart. So this week, right, as you kind of lead through some glitches, here's what I want you to remember, right? Faithfulness is success. Peace is leadership. And intention is what turns pressure into progress. If you would like to take this kind of conversation deeper, I'd love for you to join me. I offer these ministry strategy sessions and leadership labs. These are spaces that I create mostly digitally, that although some are in person, that we tackle a topic so that a person like you, a pastor like you, can lead with more clarity, more calmness, and more confidence. You can go to gavinadams.com to learn more about those, because this is important. You can't prevent all the pressure, but we can better prepare for it. And that preparation, that's actually how we better maximize the mission.